Most soldiers went into battle carrying a rifle, a canteen, and a prayer. But a German Fallschirmjäger jumped into war carrying gear that looked clever, brutal, and sometimes painfully overcomplicated, because apparently falling from the sky was not stressful enough. We have this, the Fallschirmjäger jump smock, better known as the Knochensack. It was worn over the uniform and equipment to stop straps, pockets, and loose gear from snagging during a parachute jump. It became one of the most recognizable German airborne garments of World War II. And yes, the nickname basically meant bone sack, because subtlety was not exactly the mood. Next, we have the Fallschirmjäger steel helmet. Unlike the standard German helmet, this airborne helmet had a cut-down shell and a stronger liner system to make jumping less likely to become a neck-breaking disaster. The most common wartime version was the M38 style helmet, built for airborne use, not parade ground elegance. Let's continue with the Fallschirmjäger jump trousers. These trousers were designed for field use and had practical pockets, reinforced areas, and a cut suited for movement under airborne equipment. They were not magic trousers, but compared with standard infantry clothing, they made a paratrooper look like he was actually dressed for the job. Next, we have the leather lace-up jump boots. Fallschirmjäger boots were made to give ankle support during hard landings, rough movement, and field operations after the drop. Early versions are strongly associated with side lacing designs, because apparently even boots needed to look dramatic in German airborne service. We have this, the knee pads. Fallschirmjäger could use padded protection because German parachute landings often forced men down hard onto hands, knees, and elbows. It sounds small until you remember that landing badly with full gear can turn the ground into your first enemy. Next, we have the parachute RZ-36. The RZ series parachutes were part of the German airborne system and were connected to a harness arrangement that strongly shaped how Fallschirmjäger jumped and landed. This equipment got men out of the aircraft, but it also helped create the awkward forward landing style that made German drops so rough. Let's continue with the parachute harness. German airborne harnesses used a distinctive arrangement that connected the man to the parachute system but restricted how much heavy equipment he could safely carry during a jump. That limitation mattered because rifles and machine guns often had to be dropped separately in containers, which was a brilliant idea until someone started shooting at the landing zone. Next, we have the Y-straps, or Tragehilfe. These shoulder straps helped distribute the load of field gear across the body, especially when carrying pouches, canteen, bread bag, and other equipment. They were not glamorous, but without them, the soldier's belt would sag like a bad decision. We have this, the ammunition pouches. Fallschirmjäger used different pouches depending on the weapon, including rifle ammunition pouches for the Karabiner 98K and magazine pouches for submachine guns. The pouch was simple, but in combat, simple gear that actually held ammunition was suddenly very popular. Next, we have the pistol holster. Fallschirmjäger officers, specialists, machine gun crews, and some jump troops carried pistols in leather holsters. A pistol was compact and useful during a jump, but it was never a substitute for proper infantry firepower, no matter what the movies pretend. Let's continue with the bread bag, or Brotbeutel. This fabric field bag carried personal items, rations, small tools, and everyday essentials. It was called a bread bag, but soldiers used it for far more than bread, because war has a way of ruining tidy labels. Next, we have the canteen, or Feldflasche. The German canteen usually had an aluminium or later steel bottle, a felt cover, leather or web straps, and a drinking cup. It was basic field gear, but water mattered more than speeches, medals, or whatever nonsense headquarters had planned that morning. We have this, the mess kit, or Kochgeschirr. This metal cooking and eating kit allowed soldiers to carry food, heat meals, and eat in the field. It was not fine dining, obviously, but after a long march, even a basic mess tin could look like a luxury restaurant. Next, we have the folding shovel, or Klappspaten. This compact entrenching tool helped soldiers dig firing positions, improve cover, and handle basic field tasks. It was one of those boring items that suddenly became priceless when bullets started explaining the importance of dirt. Let's continue with the gas mask, or Gasmaske. German troops commonly carried gas masks in ribbed metal canisters, even though gas weapons were not widely used on European battlefields during World War II. The canister often became a storage container too, because soldiers are very good at turning official equipment into whatever actually works.
Next, we have the compass, or Marschkompass. A compass helped with navigation after a drop, especially when units landed scattered or had to regroup across unfamiliar ground. For airborne troops, knowing where you were mattered a lot, especially after the aircraft politely threw you into chaos. We have this, dog tags, or Erkennungsmarke. These identity discs carried unit and personal identification information and were designed to be broken into sections if a soldier was killed. It was a grim little item, but historically important, because armies love paperwork even when the situation is horrifying. Next, we have the field book, or Soldbuch. The Soldbuch served as a soldier's identity and service document, recording personal details, unit information, issue records, and administrative notes. It was less dramatic than a weapon, but losing it could create a very official headache, which is somehow the most German problem imaginable. Let's continue with the field dressing, or Verbandpäckchen. This small medical packet was carried for emergency wound treatment and was part of standard soldier equipment. It was not a hospital in a wrapper, but in the first moments after injury, it could be the most important item a man had. Next, we have the Fliegerkappmesser gravity knife. This famous Luftwaffe gravity knife was issued for practical airborne tasks, especially cutting lines or freeing equipment when needed. It became closely associated with Fallschirmjäger, partly because nothing says airborne problem-solving like carrying a knife designed for tangled parachute drama. We have this, the Kampfmesser combat knife. German combat knives were used as utility blades, field tools, and close combat weapons depending on the situation. Most of the time, a knife was more useful for cutting, prying, and camp tasks than for heroic nonsense people like to imagine. Next, we have the Karabiner 98K. The bolt-action rifle fired the 7.92mm Mauser cartridge and used a 5-round internal magazine. It was accurate, rugged, and standard across German forces, but against faster-firing weapons, its old-school pace could feel very World War I, wearing a World War II uniform. Let's continue with the FG-42. The Fallschirmjäger FG-42 was a selective-fire rifle developed specifically for German airborne troops and fired the full-power 7.92mm Mauser cartridge. It was advanced, rare, expensive, and powerful, which means it was exactly the kind of brilliant weapon Germany could never produce in enough numbers. Next, we have the MP40. This submachine gun fired 9mm ammunition from a 32-round box magazine and was valued for compact firepower at close range. It was not carried by every Fallschirmjäger, but for leaders and assault troops, It was much handier than dragging a long rifle through tight spaces. We have this, the Luger P08. The Luger was a 9mm semi-automatic pistol with an 8-round magazine and a famous toggle lock action. By World War II, it was already being replaced by simpler pistols, but it still had style, because apparently even sidearms cared about reputation. Next, we have the MG34. The MG34 was a 7.92mm general-purpose machine gun used from a bipod or tripod. It was accurate and versatile, but also more complicated to manufacture because German engineers sometimes looked at simplicity and chose drama instead. Let's continue with the MG42. The MG42 also fired 7.92mm ammunition and became famous for its extremely high rate of fire. It was easier to mass-produce than the MG34 and terrifyingly effective, although it burned through ammunition like it had a personal grudge against supply officers. Next, we have the Panzerfaust. The Panzerfaust was a disposable German anti-tank weapon issued in large numbers later in the war. Fallschirmjäger could use it when facing armor, but it was a specialist battlefield tool, not something every man casually carried like a lunchbox. We have this, the Steelhandgranate M24. This stick grenade was one of Germany's most recognizable hand grenades and used a handle that improved throwing leverage. It looked strange, but the design made sense, which is annoying when the enemy's equipment is both weird and practical.
Next, we have the Ein hand grenade 39. This egg-shaped hand grenade was more compact than the stick grenade and easier to carry in quantity. It sacrificed the long throwing handle, but it saved space, and soldiers always cared about space once their gear started multiplying. Let's continue with the Nebel hand grenade. This was a smoke hand grenade used to create concealment, signal movement, or obscure positions. It was not meant to win a fight by itself, but smoke could make the difference between movement and becoming an easy target. Next, we have the Granatwerfer 36. This was a light 50mm mortar used by German infantry early in the war to provide small unit indirect fire. Fallschirmjäger could encounter or use light mortar support depending on unit and period, but like many clever lightweight weapons, it became less favored as the war demanded heavier punch. So every item a German Fallschirmjäger carried tells the same story. These troops needed gear that could survive the jump, survive the landing, and still function once the real fight began. Some items were brilliantly specialized, some were ordinary field gear, and some were over-engineered enough to make a mechanic quietly suffer. And that is what makes the Fallschirmjäger kit so fascinating. It was not just a collection of weapons and uniforms, it was a complete airborne system built around one brutal problem: how to drop soldiers from the sky and somehow expect them to fight immediately after landing. If you want more World War II equipment breakdowns like this, stay with the channel, because next time we may look at the gear of another army and ask the same uncomfortable question: how much of it was genius and how much of it was just a soldier carrying too much misery on his back?